We are going to talk about characterization now. Characterization just means all of the qualities and characteristics of your characters. So there's a couple different types of characters. Of course, you have your main character, the hero of your story, and that is known as the protagonist. So in the story of Harry Potter, of course, Harry Potter is our protagonist. Then you have your antagonist. That is the bad guy. That's the villain. So in Harry Potter, I'm using that example because most of you are familiar with that story, even if you've never read the book. But the antagonist in Harry Potter is Voldemort. He's the bad guy. So pro usually means good or for, and ant is like anti, which means against. So that's how you can kind of keep those straight. So the protagonist is your hero of the story. Usually that's the good guy. You do have some movies, for example, like Ocean's 11, some movies and books where the good guy is a bad guy, but yet it's the person that you're rooting for. It's the person that is the hero of the story. So that's the first thing that you want to pay attention to, is who is the protagonist and who is the antagonist. And you can have more than one. So for example, in Harry Potter, Harry is the main protagonist. So if you had to pick just one, it's going to be Harry Potter. But then you also have Ron Weasley, you have Hermione, and you also have Professor Dumbledore. They're all protagonists as well. Um, so that is the first main thing that you need to know with characterization, is protagonist and antagonist. The next thing you need to know is the difference between a dynamic and a static character. So a dynamic character is someone who changes throughout the course of the story, because it can be really, really, really boring to read a whole book or watch a whole movie and the main character that you've been, cheering for the whole time doesn't change. Okay, so that means they didn't grow, as in like physically they didn't change at all. But it also means that they didn't learn anything. So that is the main thing with dynamic, is they need to change between the beginning and the end. And any character can be a dynamic character. It won't necessarily be just the protagonist. If you have several protagonists, several antagonists, they can all be dynamic characters. And the more dynamic characters you have in a story, the better the story is, because those are the characters that you can really get behind. They're the ones that you fall in love with, that you really cheer for. So the opposite of that is a static character. A static character does not change. So however they are at the beginning, that's how they are at the end. Now that doesn't mean that, they're wearing the same clothes, or that doesn't mean they never change their hairstyle, things like that. But it means they don't learn anything that affects their behavior or what makes them them. So, going back to the Harry Potter example, at the beginning of the story, Harry is really young. He's still kind of naive. He knows nothing of the magic world yet at the very beginning of the first book or movie. He doesn't know anything about the magic world. He feels extremely alone. He feels extremely unloved. And he feels like he's worthless. Nobody cares about him. At the end of the story, he is confident. He knows that people care about him. He knows what home is. As I said in the plot video, he ends that first story with the iconic, I'm not really going home, because he knows that Hogwarts and the Wizarding World, that is his home now. Whereas the Dursleys, not so much. He lives there. Fortunately, after he goes to Hogwarts, he only lives there in the summer. But he lives there, but it's not home. At the beginning of the book, he's kind of shy and timid because he's being so emotionally abused. And at the end, he's really confident. He has just defeated the worst bad guy that the Wizarding World has ever known. So he changes a lot throughout the story. You see Ron and Hermione change as well. And you also see, for example, Professor Quirrell and Voldemort change a little bit. Voldemort, not as much, just because we only see him for just a little bit. But, you see them change throughout the the book or movie as well. However, you have other characters who don't really change any. For example, you've got Neville. He's kind of a side character, and he becomes important in later books and movies of the Harry Potter series. But in that first one, he's one of their classmates, but he doesn't really change a lot. I mean, he has that burst of confidence at the end where he tries to stop, the three protagonists from leaving their dorm room. But really, he doesn't change much. So he's a static character. And that is usually what you'll find. Your main characters, the people you see the most of in any story, they're the ones that are going to change. And then it's usually the more background characters that don't change. So most stories that have lots of characters will do that. They will have, your dynamic characters that are the forefront people, usually the main protagonists and the antagonists. And then you have kind of everybody else that just stands in the backgrounds. Like the Dursleys, they're extremely important in the story. If you were to take out the Dursleys, a lot of it would not make sense. But they don't change any. They're just as useless and mean and abusive at the end of the book as they are at the beginning. So hopefully that makes sense, the difference between dynamic and static. So I want you to think about dynamic and static throughout the rest of this course. You're going to use that a lot. And then also think about protagonist and antagonist a lot. So if you have questions about what any of those mean, please contact me because you will need that throughout the course. One last little characterization definition that I want to throw at you is foil. So the foil is kind of like the opposite of one of the characters. So usually what they will do is they will have a foil either for a protagonist or for an antagonist, sometimes for both. But it's kind of meant to be just enough of an opposite that it makes your more main person look better. So, for example, in Harry Potter, you have Harry. He is your main protagonist. His foil is Ron Weasley. Ron is still a protagonist. He's still one of your most important characters in that. And he's also extremely dynamic. Okay, you can be dynamic and protagonist and all of that and still be the foil. So Harry and Ron are foils of each other. Now let me give you some examples that hopefully will demonstrate what this concept means. So Harry is meant to be viewed increasingly throughout the stories as brave and smart and really talented with the wizarding stuff. So all of the magic potions, all of that stuff that goes with it. He's also extremely athletic when it comes to the Quidditch. He, in the later books, he becomes the Quidditch captain for a little while. So different things like that. He's meant to be seen that way. And then you have Ron. Okay, he's not dumb, and he's not a coward. He follows Harry through everything. But they give him some comic lines to kind of make him look a little weaker, just so that Harry looks better. So if you think of the second one, hopefully you've seen the second one as well as the first one, or read it. They're about to follow the spiders, and Harry's not all that thrilled about the idea either, but he just marches out. He's gonna follow the spiders. And then Ron follows him, and keep in mind, he's going. Okay, so he's not just this cowardly little boy that's not gonna do anything. He still goes. But as they leave, he says, "Follow the spiders. Why couldn't it be follow the butterflies?" And because he kind of simpers a little bit at that, it makes Harry look that much braver. So that's what a foil does. So hopefully all 5 of those terms make sense. With characterization, you also need to keep in mind just the general characteristics of your character. That means what they look like. Do they have dark hair? Do they have light hair? Are they a fairy versus a human or a mermaid? Is your main character a dragon? All of that kind of stuff. And then you have their personality traits. So things like smart and brave and funny. And then you have, do they have a good sense of humor? Do they not? Are they really serious, or would they rather be goofing off? Are they responsible? Are they irresponsible? All of those things that you think of, hopefully, when you think of characterization. You have all of that